Hi everyone, hope all of you guys are having a spooky night. Tonight I'm going to be giving you guys my spoiler review of The Others. This is a horror movie that I actually hadn't rewatched in a long time, but I really wanted to this October, and I decided I also wanted to do a review on it because I've never talked about it on my channel. And I've always thought that this movie was really underrated. I remember when I first watched it a couple of years back, I was wondering why I wasn't hearing more buzz around this movie, and I just want to say if you haven't seen this movie, I highly recommend watching it because it's a pretty interesting haunted house movie. I think it has great writing, great characters, a great twist, and just a lot of really great things overall happening in this movie. And if you haven't seen the movie, this is your warning that there are spoilers in this video, but for all of you guys who have seen the movie or don't care about spoilers, I hope you enjoyed today's review. And also, let me know what you guys think about this movie down below. I just want to start off by saying that I think Alejandro Amenabar did a great job with the directing because there's this sense of dread and isolation, and all of those factors add to the eeriness of this movie and the creepy factor because if you've seen this movie, you know that there really aren't any jump scares, and this movie is pretty slow paced, and when you really think about the horrors that are happening in this, it's pretty tame compared to other horror movies and other haunted house and supernatural movies. So a lot of the horror vibe of this movie has to do with its atmosphere that's being built, and I think the director did a really great job with that because even from the beginning of the movie, before you really know what the plot's about, before you really get introduced to these characters, you sort of have this weird feeling the entire time that there's something incredibly off about everything. And I also really love when horror movies, especially haunted house horror movies, really give character to the house. For example, this house is always extremely dark. There always has to be curtains, and they always have to be closed wherever the children are. And darkness is usually scarier than daylight, so the movie gets to play around with that a lot, which is really cool. And as an audience member, you're sort of feeling two things at once. You're feeling worried whenever there are no curtains, and you have the anxiety of how the curtains always have to be closed because these children, according to their mother, get affected by daylight and it could kill them. So you have that going on, but also when it's dark, you're scared of something popping up, or you're just scared because you think there's ghosts or something around in this house. I also love the cinematography in this movie because a lot of the scenes are in the dark. There's a lot of use of natural lighting involved because they use a lot of candlelight. All of that makes for really beautiful lighting and beautiful shots, and I think the cinematographer did a great job because again, it's all servicing this atmosphere and it all feels very cohesive. And also I think because there is so much darkness in this movie, there's sort of a blend between reality and the supernatural as well, because sometimes you're not really sure what's real or not. There's a really good shot in this movie where Nicole Kidman's character is like trying to find the ghost in these houses or whatever's making the noise, whatever she thinks is making the noise, and then it's this shot where basically you see the man's face, but then she turns on the light and you realize it's a painting. And scenes like that is why I love the use of the light and dark in this movie, because they really got to play around a lot with it, and it makes it really interesting for the audience members to sort of like be figuring out like what's actually on screen and what isn't on screen. And just moments like that are like what the jump scares in this movie are, and I appreciate that because I don't like false jump scares, but little moments like this like kind of like shake you a little bit. I'm okay with that, and I think it just adds slowly, gradually to how off this entire movie feels. But I want to talk about Nicole Kidman because I feel like she's also underrated for this movie. Nobody talks about her performance in this movie. I thought it was really good. She's affected by being alone in this house with her children in the dark. I mean, that would kind of drive anybody insane. Also, her husband is off at war. She hasn't heard from him. She has these new servants in the house that are being weird. So there's a lot going on with her character. She's extremely complex, and it adds a lot to the psychological horror factor of it, because sometimes as you're watching it, you're wondering, is she going insane? The movie sort of puts you in her perspective because nobody knows what's going on. Everybody's being weird, and I think the movie really excelled at that and embraced that, and it really just saves it all until the end for it to work. But even though we don't really know what's happening the entire time until the very end, I still think the movie works because the entire time you're making up theories of what's happening and you're trying to make sense of everything. And in general, back to Nicole Kidman, her performance excels the entire movie, and what I really like is that her character sort of goes through like more paranoia, more fear as the movie goes on, and she sort of becomes more unhinged by the end of it, and I think she did a great job. Also, her and the child actors Their chemistry was great. I also think the child actors were pretty good. And I think her connection with the children adds the emotional depth as well, because you kind of get a sense that this family has been through some stuff and they're still going through some things. So it makes you curious as to how everything is going to tie together. And the servants as well in this movie, especially Bertha, I thought were really good. And they also add to the unease because they sort of pop out of nowhere. You find out earlier in the movie that Grace never sent out the letters that were calling for new servants and nannies. So you sort of start to wonder, like, where do they come from? Are they good? Are they bad? And that whole scenario. And the plot of this movie, although it's very simple, it's these people that are living in this isolated house and they're being disturbed by others. Sort of becomes this puzzle in a sense, because you don't ever see the ghosts that, for example, the child is talking about, and you don't know if like there's physical intruders, if it's the servants, if it's actual ghosts. You don't know what's happening. But then when it's revealed, it's so freaking cool. And that's my favorite thing about this movie. I love the twist. The first time I watched it, I was actually like so shocked by it, and this is my second time watching it for doing this review, and I was so happy to say that the twist didn't like ruin the movie. And what I mean by that is that sometimes a movie is good with a twist only the first time you watch it, or at least in my opinion, because then the second time it's not as fun. I think in this case it was really cool to sort of pick up on little things and little moments that you know have to do with the twist and sort of give you clues. Basically, the big twist is that they're all dead and the others are actually humans. So this entire movie was being told in the perspective of Ghost. One of my favorite scenes as well, it's towards the end when she sort of starts figuring out what happened. She's like ripping off the papers of the people's desk, the people who are trying to contact the ghost, and it switches perspective from the ghost and then the real people. And it's cool because I feel like there's not many horror movies, or I can't even think of one right now that's in the perspective of the ghost. It sort of explains everything, and it explains the child that the girl was seeing, and also why the curtains went missing, why things were being moved. It's sort of a reverse haunted house story from what we're usually used to, and I thought that was just great. The one complaint that I probably have with this movie is that I don't really understand the role of her husband in the movie. He comes back after she like leaves the house to try to find a priest to like bless the house and things like that, when she like starts thinking that there's the ghost around, and then he sort of like disappears. But I never understood if he was like dead or alive. Like I assume he was dead because that's why she was contacting him. I feel like the role of the dad here is just weird. Like I like the whole thing that he's gone off to war and the children miss their dad and things like that, but I feel like bringing him back, I don't really get what the purpose of that was, in my opinion. But I'm interested to hear what you guys think about that. And the other thing that could probably be said is that like there's little explanation to certain things. Like you sort of don't really know why she did that to her children. Like I feel like it's very vague, but at the same time that one doesn't really bother me too much because I just think the whole thing is pretty good, and that's just like a small nitpick that I'm like, oh, but why would she do that, and things like that. But I love this movie. I think if you haven't seen it, why are you watching this video? Because I basically just spoiled to you the big twist that they're dead. Another thing about the twist that I like though is that they're sort of like two twists in one, because when you're watching it, the first twist is that the servants are dead, and you have this sort of thing where like, holy crap, they're the bad ones, they're the ones that have been doing everything to this house. And then it's the other twist where like, no, they're also dead and they were trying to also tell them that. I love this movie. I think it's a great horror film. Also, just a great movie if you don't really want to be scared too much. I'm really glad I rewatched it and did this review because it's been a couple years since I had seen it, and I'm super glad that it still holds up from what I remembered on my first watch. But let me know what you guys thought about this movie if you haven't down below. I would love to hear all of your thoughts. And thank you all so much for watching today's horror review. I will see you all in the next one. Bye everyone!